Okay. So on page 26, we're going to get on this in a moment. Okay. Just a review. Cosine law. If we go back a little bit, so just keep your finger on 26, right? The only two cases where you use a cosine law would be where you know all three sides, or where you have side angle side, the angle is in between, right? The angle is in between the two sides that you know. Another way that I tell my students, you know, it's not going to be cosine law is if you see a pair, right? If you're somehow able to get an angle and the side across from it, you know it's going to be sine law, right? And the thing is that 99.9% of the time, I'd say all the time, you're going to have to choose which one to start. Once you find one more item, so be it a side or an angle, you can switch over to the other law, okay? You can do whatever you want afterwards. And so if we go even further back with sine law, just keep your finger on 26, right, as I was saying. With sine law, if we're solving for a side, this is on page 4 here, page 4, if you have a pair, it's definitely sine law. So you set it up with your pair. The known pair is always how I start. And then I go equals, and then I will go sine of, let's say, an angle. So if you know an angle, then you're probably going to want to find the side across from it. Remember this. Sometimes, this is on page 4, sometimes the question will ask you for a side that is at first not solvable. At first you'd be like, well, I can't do it. Then think about, what can I do, right? What can I do until I get there? So start solving other stuff, right? Other sides or angles until you're able to solve for the one that I actually ask for. So it's not always going to be a slam dunk where it's like one step, you're done. Sometimes you're going to have to take multiple steps, okay, to get that done. So on page 4, we learned how to solve for a missing side. And then on page 5, we learned how to solve for a missing angle, an unknown angle, using sine law. And really, if you have the pair, whether you're getting a diagram or you make your own, you start with that pair, and then on the other side, it's going to be sine of that angle that you're trying to find over the side length. Okay, and so the key point, if you're on page 5 right now, okay, one thing that I want to make sure you understand is that you're going to have to use the inverse, sine inverse, before you actually determine the angle size. And make sure you always have degrees, and you always round to 2 decimals. Okay, that's what you need to make sure you do. Okay, so sine law, listen to this part. Sine law always looks exactly the same at the beginning. You don't have 2 different formulas, right? So at the beginning, we always set it up like this, and then you either solve for an angle or you solve for a side, but the initial step is the same. Okay. Maybe to warm up. Did I assign page 6? I don't think I did. That one right there. Let's do a warm up on page 6. I'll ask you to solve for side R. Okay, no AC, so just low, the stakes are very low. If you get it wrong, no big deal. So on page 6, it wants you to solve for angle R, and just to make sure, not angle R, sorry, side R. It's asking for this. At first, it seems like you cannot do it, right? But what can you do? Ask yourself that first. How about we answer this together, because it feels like a Monday, right? You see the pair? You see this angle? This angle is paired up with that side. So you know it's sine law, no surprise. What is the only thing that I can solve for in this particular case? What's the first thing that I can do? I have my pair, and I have this side, correct? So what does that allow me to do? If I have the side, then I can find the angle across from it. So that's going to be your first order of business. Okay? So if you're not quite sure what to do, I'll get you started. Mr. Dirksen is asking for side R. Why aren't you solving for side R? I can't at the moment. Okay? I have to start by solving angle Q, and then I solve for, and then I'll solve for angle R, which is going to allow me to solve for side R. Okay, so that's like the order of business. This is a multi-step question here. So I'll get you to try this, look at the notes, and is done right. So make sure when you follow, the right final answer is great, but make sure the notation along the way is also done properly, okay? So sine of Q, right, we multiply and then we divide. So this would be, I would like to see this work, right, where you show me how you multiply, you show me how you divide. When you do that, I'm just going to do it. Okay, 9 times sine of 103, and then you divide by 12.7, so you get 0.6904, and that keeps going. In order to get, at this point, you can drop the sine, right? And then it's sine inverse of this. Okay, that would be the next step. Then you go second. No, sorry, what am I doing here? Second sine, copy, paste. You can close the bracket. At this point, it doesn't really matter. So angle Q is 43.67. Oh, I didn't even plan that. That is just, it just happened. Right? 43.67. So you know that this angle here, okay, if you need to do that, you go ahead and do that. Page 6. The next step is I will find angle R, because that allows me to solve for side R, okay? Which I know that I saw a lot of answers that match this. So 180 minus 103 minus 43.67. So I'm not even going to try doing this without a calculator this morning, because I'm going to get it wrong. Okay, that's another angle there. Okay, so that's important to me, not the final answer. Now that you have this one here, you solve for side R. So you need to do another sine law. I will stick to the pair I was given right from the beginning, okay? And now I'm going to go sine of 33.33 degrees over side R. Now I can solve for what the question was really asking, right? So cross multiply and divide. Show me this step here. And this is sine of 103. And if you do that, you get 7.16 inches if you round it correctly. That is your final answer. Get used to, even on the final exam next year, or even the exam at the end of this semester, they always want you to clearly identify the final answer. If you said R is this, that would actually be good enough because you've labeled. You said side R is that, but sometimes students just have no letters, just a bunch of numbers all over the place. You would lose half a mark. So if you care for half a mark, make sure I know which one is the final answer, right? So either circle it, that's what I prefer. But if you just label it, we're fine here, okay? So that's a review on sine law. It actually did both, right? Side and angle, so I like how that happened there. And you got 6, 7 in there, so how much? 26. I'm going to walk around a little bit on this one as well. Obviously, this is cosine law. That's not a surprise, right? I'm not going to trick you. I don't know if you need a review on how to use this one, cosine law here. Some of you do. Some of you do. I'll do it. If you don't, you can tune me out and just do this by yourself. That's fine. So this is side angle side, okay? That's what I mean by side angle side. The angle connects the two sides. So the only thing I can solve for is, it says solve the triangle, okay? It does say that, but at first, this is your first option. That's the only thing you can solve for right from the beginning. So what does that formula call for? Let's label here first. If this is angle y, this is side y. If this is angle x, this is side x. So you've got c, y, x as your sides. This is how I would write my formula. C squared is equal to y squared plus x squared minus 2 times y times x times cosine of the one that's across the side you're trying to find, c. Okay? Can you plug in and solve that? I'll leave that up to you for now. And then once you're done that, solve for the rest of the triangle. Okay? Solve the triangle using any law you want. I would prefer you using cosine law for today. You can check the answers up here to see if you're doing all right, so I can walk around and check. So again, notation, but other than that, I think we're on the right track. But just make sure you put in the numbers where they belong. Okay, pay attention to this part. I know you've plugged in and you probably didn't notice, but try to, can you all press cosine of 103? Cosine of 103 degrees. 103 is what kind of angle? It's an obtuse angle, right? So if you notice that it's negative, right? It's normal for cosine. It's normal for cosine to get a negative as an answer. Don't let that throw you off. It really, if you type this all in one shot, this negative that you get out of cosine 103 will eventually multiply all the way through and then meets this negative here. What happens when two negatives meet? Turns positive. So the calculator does that for you. That's why I would suggest you type in the whole thing, okay? And there's one more item that I need to discuss before we move on. So c squared is 1038.051 something. At that point, you need to take either, this is one way of showing that work, is you take the square root of both sides. Okay, that's really what's happening, and so that square cancels with the square root. And then basically what you're doing is taking the square root of, oops, what did I do here? Square root of that side. Okay, so that's 32.22 inches is that side C there, which is the longest side, which makes sense because it's across the largest angle. So that's something that I would want you to observe. Okay, now we're gonna solve for, now we have a side, right guys? Side. So I'm gonna use cosine law, even though you could have used sine law if you wanted to, because you also have a pair. But if this is 32.22, side, which angle should I solve for? It really doesn't matter. If you solve for y, let's say, this angle, I'm going to cut this off here. You would start like this, cosine of y. What you need to make sure is that you make sure that y side y squared is subtracted, right? And then the other two sides, which is, sorry, yeah, c and x, right? C squared plus x squared, they are the ones that are added, but make sure that y, which is across angle y, is at the end. Okay? I know you're kind of sleepy and tired, but that's the one I want you to remember. And then at the bottom is 2 times c times x. Okay? That is, do you need to write out the formula with letters every time? You don't. You can go straight into numbers. That's fine. But I will, I'm doing this because you're still learning, right? So this would be 32.22 squared. Can you type this in? If you didn't use cosine law, I want you to type this in or solve it using cosine law, because that's what I'm doing here. X is 26.7 squared. and then this will be minus 13 squared. Then it's 2 times 32.22 times 26.7. I recommend this. I will never force you to solve it my way, okay? If somebody else out there, there's smarter people out there that can teach you a different way. As long as you have the right notation, I'm fine with it, okay? But this is what I suggest because I've seen a lot, right? I've seen it all. Not all, but a lot, okay? You got to make sure you do the top separately. I know some of you just like to type in the whole thing in one shot. But this is what I get in my numerator. And then I go 2 times this times that, right? I multiply this out. 2 times 32.22 times 26.7. I get that in the denominator. And then I divide. And that's just copy paste, right? I take the numerator, I divide it by the denominator. And this better start with a 0 or else you're going to get an error. So if you get an error, you got to restart. One of the numbers is off. Maybe you didn't put the number in the right place, but that's what you're supposed to get. Last but not least, angle y. That's when you can just go angle y. You go cosine inverse of this. Do not round too early. RE means rounding early, okay? Second cosine, call it. And you get 23.15. I get 15 as well, using cosine law, so I was wrong, okay? I think it's 23.15 regardless. So that's that. And then you can easily find the other angle, which is angle X. You go 180 minus 103 minus 32.22. Sorry, that's not an angle. That's a side length. Slow down. Slow down. What's the rush? Here, angle X is 53 point what then? 0.85, right? If I use my numbers that I just solved for. Okay, so there's the 3 remaining items that needed to be solved for. Okay, and that's all crooked there. How would you find the height of this triangle, folks? Do you remember that? Let's go up here. I want you to see. Find a slant. Tell me where the slant is. Is this a slant right here? Yes. Can I use this angle? Can I use this length times sine of 103? You can't technically, but I'm going to tell you yes you can. Okay? Watch this. If this is 103, then this is 77, not 87. 77. Okay? You could use this slant times sine of 77, or you could use this slant here times, that's probably the one most of you will prefer, times that angle right there. So how about we all just pick this one here, and then that angle that is formed in that corner, which is, we know that x is 53.85. Maybe write it down in here. 53.85 is the angle. I will use a highlighter for that, so that when you come back to this page, I will highlight x, and I will highlight x right there. So I highlighted it in my work, and I highlighted it up on the triangle. So to find the height, the shortcut is slant times sine of angle. I will just call it A. Okay. So the slant at that point is 32.22 times sine of 53.85. Okay, so that's your answer there, and that's 2602 it's supposed to be, but my rounding seems to have been off, so I will redo it. 2601. No, 2602 if you round it correctly. So that is the height of the triangle. Let's use the same highlighters. I'm gonna give this the pink color, just like the color up here on my triangle. And I will use this highlighter, which I used for the angle there, sorry, right there, to give me the angle. That's how you find the height. And if I'm going to use a red pen for this one, I'm going to actually draw the height. Where is the height? Is it inside the triangle or outside the triangle? It's outside. It's outside because the height is always measured from the tallest point straight down. That is the height of the triangle, right? That's how you would measure the height of anything, right? You're like, how tall is this, right? Well, you measure from a 90, go straight up to the tallest point, right? So that's what that is. So that's my 90, my height there. Okay? All right. I want you to try one more here. Hold on. Yes, page 27. And then we'll mix it up. Then you're going to have to decide, is it sine law or is it cosine law? Page 27. What kind of triangle is this if you just look without even sketching? This is which case? Cosine is correct. Side, side, side. Okay. It wants the largest angle. Which side do you think, which angle are you going to look for? X, yeah. This is the longest side, right? There are going to be questions that I will be kind of sneaky on that, right? I'll be like, someone is trying to install something and needs an angle of at least 70 degrees. You shouldn't be checking every single angle. You should check like which one is the largest angle in that room based on the size, right? The side lengths. That's it. If you solve for the largest angle and the largest angle is 60, then there's no way 70 will be found, right? There's no 70 to be had. So don't be like, this is something that I really want you to know. Like the largest angle is across the longest side, smallest angle is across the shortest side. So go ahead, make me a sketch, and then solve for the largest angle. Okay? Sketch is optional, but I would say it would be nice for you to have a little sketch to go off of. So go ahead and find that there's going to be something that's going to happen. That's why I want you to do this. Okay? You're going to see a negative somewhere, but it's fine. Okay? So go for it. Triangle XYZ. So X would be here. Okay? Y is here. Z is there. Okay? So I want this angle because it's across the longest side, so that's the angle I want. This is how I would write it out. Cosine of angle X. You got to make sure that side X is at the top, subtracting, always squaring. Okay? Then it's Y and Z. Y squared plus Z squared. In the denominator is 2 times that first side times that second side. Side X does not show up anywhere else. Like this side that's across the angle you're trying to find doesn't show up anywhere else. Okay? This is the only location. So, given that template, you just plug in. Y is 2.8. Z is 2.4. X is 5.1. Divided by 2 times 2.8 times 2.4. Okay, that is a must. Now, those of you that love to type in everything in one shot, I would warn you against that. Okay, I would strongly suggest don't do it. Just go ahead and type in the top, square everything, make sure you subtract the last one. You get negative 12.41 over 2 times 2.8 times 2.4. So I do the denominator separately. You get 13.44. Now divide them one more time. Okay? Divide that by the denominator. you get negative 0.923, and that keeps going, right? I'll show you write this one down. So I plug in all my numbers. I do the top, I do the bottom. Then I divide, and you should get a negative. That's the one I'm going to highlight here. There's a negative there, there's a negative there. Do not drop the negative, because you're going to get a completely different answer if you do so. That tells us, right, it will be an obtuse angle. Okay, greater than 90 degrees. Okay, if you have a negative, you know that your answer is expected to be greater than 90. I don't know if you're going to come across this, but there could be a chance that the top adds up to 0. You get a perfect 0. What angle do you think that would be? If this is positive, you get acute. If this is negative, you get obtuse. If it's 0, it's a 90. It's a 90-degree angle. Okay, so if you ever get a 0 on the top, the whole thing is 0. Watch this. If you try to take the inverse cosine of 0, you get 90 degrees. Okay, so that's another cool feature here. So angle x is equal to cosine inverse of negative 0.923 something. All you need to do is call cosine inverse, so second cosine. I'm going to go and copy that number down, and you get 157.42. Okay, 157.42 degrees. And that's how you solve for an angle using cosine law. Okay, side, side, side. There's a formula. Some of you might, after today, okay, I would expect you to all have the formulas for everything on your study sheet by tomorrow, right? If I see you, you're supposed to have this one on there. You're supposed to have the one for SAS. You're supposed to have your sine law, things like that. Next to cosine, guys, you can actually have a note. You can have a note. Can I go back to, I'm going to go back to 24 and now make a note here. Go to 24, and I'll just make a note right on the side of this formula. If numerator is negative, I didn't talk about that last week. If numerator is negative, then you have obtuse angle. I would put this next to this side case, next to this formula. I would have this written on my study sheet, just in case you forget. Some of you will not forget. You just like, whatever, I know this, right? But it's probably a good idea to have that on there. And when solving side, 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 those of you that like to switch over to sine law, you just love sine law, you can't get enough of it. You must solve for the largest angle first. And this is why. Sine law will never give you an obtuse angle. Even if it's supposed to be one, sine law will never do that. Therefore, if you solve for the largest angle and it happens to be obtuse, cosine law will catch it. Cosine will be like, oh, I know this is an obtuse angle, no problem, you get it out of the way, okay? Because a triangle can only have one obtuse angle max. It cannot have more than one obtuse, right? Because think about it. If one is 91, it's just slightly obtuse, right? And another one is 91, what does that add up to already? 182. So two angles add up to 182? Can't be, right? A triangle has a maximum of 180 interior sum, okay? Okay, now we're going to skip a few pages here to page 31. This is where I want you to park right now. And the rest of today's class is going to be spent here. So I'm actually going to say pages 31 to 33. Is on here. Go to page 31, write this down. The key to these pages is actually just following 33. Okay, so if you keep flipping through it, watch this. If you go to page 34, the triangle you are solving is completely solved here. So all the side lengths appear, all the angles appear. This is on page 34. This is the key, right, to the previous pages. The only downside is it's all rounded to the nearest whole number. So your number will be close, but not exactly what you see there, but that's, for now, that's good enough. Let's go back to 31. Your job right now is to figure out which law do I need to solve this thing, okay? I'm just going to ask you to do this. Instead of solving each triangle, like solving the entire thing, just solve for the only thing that you can solve for as the very first step. So for example, this one right here. What case is this? Which means it's, so some students tell me, oh, I need to use SSS on this one. You're close, but you're actually using cosine law, right? SSS just to identify it. So watch this. Let's put a question mark. Which one am I going to ask you to solve if it's SSS? Which is the first one you're going to solve for? Angle B, correct? Because it's across the longest side. Put a question mark there. That's all I want you to do on that one. What is this here? What case is this? Sine law? SAS, cosine. And no, this is what I want you to practice, okay? So if you get it wrong, big deal. But this is so cosine law, right? This is SAS, cosine law. What's the only thing you can solve here? The only thing that you can solve right now? The only thing you can solve for is this side right here. That's the only option you have. So let's just focus on solving that, okay? You don't have a pair, right? No pair, no pair. Can't be sine law, right? Next. Those ones are the same, so I'm not even gonna go there. Let's go to 32. Let's go to, question 5, I'm going to ask you to solve for that angle right there. Question 6, I'm going to ask you to solve for that side right there where the question mark is. Let's go to 7 and 8. I'm going to ask you to solve for this side right there. And 8, I'm going to ask you to solve for that side right there. Let's go to 33. 33, you're there. On page 33, I'm going to ask you to solve for that angle right there, angle B. And on question 10, I'm going to ask you to solve for that angle right there, okay, angle C. Don't solve the whole triangle. I don't want you to do that. That's too much time right now. I want you to practice which law am I using here. By the way, if I ask you what law am I using here? Sine, because you've got your pair, right? There we go. So sine law. Don't use cosine law because it won't work, okay? Cosine only works for side, 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 or side, angle, side. Okay, so the rest of the class, just focus on that. I don't want to see